We're still doing Zoom meetings, of course, and so in a couple minutes we'll have songs from Louise. Our talk today will be given by Judge Eric Andelll. We will break out into discussion groups and then come back for some Q&A and then have another song. So with that, let's kick off this morning with 2 songs from Louise.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to play some originals for y'all today. I'm going to start with my probably most well-known song. People seem to like it a lot. So I hope you enjoy and sit back and enjoy a concert from your home, because that's pretty fancy, isn't it?
Long ago he sailed out into the seas. I was following him, he was not following me. So far I cannot hear them calling. I look to you, but you look down at me. I'll never reach just as long as I can breathe. So far I cannot see you now. What is it like? Long ago we depended on our dreams, and I was following him, for he was following me. I never thought that I would ever lose myself. How do we get so far in the wrong direction? I thought we had it all understood, not underwhelmed. How did we get here? I cried out. How did we get here when I tried so hard to run? Blinded by mistakes I can never take back. Blinded by mistakes I can never take back. Long ago we sailed out over the ocean. Long ago we sailed out over the seas. I promise to catch you as long as you will catch me too. I promise I will help you reach your dreams. Long ago we sailed out into the sea. I was following him, and I'd hoped that he was following me. So far I cannot hear you now.
And that was a good start there. I just want to make sure my audio is flipped to the right one, because I know it kept flipping back earlier. I see clapping hands, so you could hear me well enough. Yay! Okay, good. So I always like to say that I have like 3 different settings of who I am as a person and performance-wise. Aside from music, I'm also a circus performer and a clown. So it's funny because my stage presence is usually very comedic, but my music is more on the melancholy side. So musically, my settings are I'm either going to make you cry or fall asleep. And other than that, you're probably going to laugh until you cry or fall asleep, you know. So at least I'm consistent. But I think this song is my personal favorite one, and I'll get you in your feels before we jump into this meeting today. Okay. There we are.
Tomorrow to come, patiently waiting, for I know she's the one. She's the one that'll settle my heart and my soul. If I fear for nothing, I'm letting her Remember the taste of me on your tongue. Oh, we were just kids trying to have some fun. But the world doesn't see us for who we are. No, the world didn't see us for who we are. We used to drive around all night, blasting our music, running the red lights. Oh, and we'd freak out and then laugh it off. Never thought that I would see you go. Oh, but who am I kidding? I pushed you away. Ever so slowly, day by day. Now all I can do is sit here and wait. Oh, I'll see you again. I'll see you someday. Oh, I fear for you, you call my name, and I know the truth. Oh, once again, and today we will sing. Tomorrow may come, and I waste my days sitting in the sun. Oh, today we will sing. Tomorrow may come, and then I'll waste my days sitting in the sun. Yes, today we will sing. Tomorrow will come, and then I waste my days sitting in the sun. It's you, I know that it's you. It's you, I know that it's you.
And that's my two to start you off.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Judge Eric Andelll works as an assigned judge, arbitrator, and mediator. In those capacities, he's been called upon to hear and resolve hundreds of complex business litigation issues. He served actively as a judge for over 30 years, including 7 years as judge of the 315th District Court and 8 years on the First Court of Appeals, hearing all types of disputes. He was named Outstanding Texas Judge by the Texas Bar Association and was twice recognized as Appellate Judge of the Year by the Texas Association of Civil Trial and Appellate Specialists. He also received the University of Houston Law Center Distinguished Alumnus Award, the Centennial Top 100 Award from the University of Arizona, and was recently awarded the Waller County Child Welfare Board's Judge of the Year. After the Court of Appeals, Judge Andell has served for years as Deputy Undersecretary of Education in Washington, D.C. So please help me welcome to the screen Judge Eric Andelll.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for letting me share this Sunday morning with you. I didn't know that I'd ever appear before the Oasis group until I made a little presentation, and Louis was there, your guy Lou. And as you know, Lou, he's pretty tenacious, and asked me if I would come to an Oasis group. And then he asked if I would come to an Oasis group, and he continued to ask, and emails. And I said, well, what exactly do you want me to do? He said, well, it's a social gathering. We'll have coffee, et cetera. We'll get to know each other. And I said, well, I would love to come. And then he said, well, maybe you can talk. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he said, about 15 minutes. So Let me give you Eric Andelll on juvenile law, a view from the bench in 15, 20 minutes. I am primarily a juvenile court judge and have spent most of my career working with children's issues. Started as when I was late third. Well, I started when I was 29 and was named the vice chair of the Mental Health and Mental Retardation Authority of Harris County. And that's where I cut my teeth with regard to dealing with children's issues, particularly those with mental health issues. And at that particular time, I was just a practicing lawyer that dealt with, and my appointments came through the juvenile system. And then it morphed into an appointment by Governor Mark White to the 315th Court, which is juvenile court. So I extended my career dealing with kids until that time. And then Ann Richards put me on the Court of Appeals, much to my chagrin, because I argued with her that I didn't want to go on the Court of Appeals. I wanted to stay right where I was in the juvenile courts. At that time, you all are too young to remember, but I had a nationally syndicated TV show called Juvenile Justice, and I would have preferred not to go to a different court, even though that's a career increase to go to the Court of Appeals. And the governor said something to me that I will never forget. She said, well, now, Eric, I know you want to stay in the juvenile court. You're a good juvenile court judge. I enjoy your TV show. I named you chair of the Texas Juvenile Probation Commission. But I want to remind you of one thing. You can only tell a governor no once. So that was my lesson in life, that I could not say no to the governor, and moved to the Court of Appeals. And I spent my career there until I took retirement status, senior status as a judge. And then I was fortunate enough to go with Dr. Rod Page to Washington, D.C. to serve as Deputy Undersecretary of Education, which put me right back in where I really love my passion, being children. You know, I got back from D.C., I continued my career as a visiting judge, but primarily assigned to hear all the child abuse cases in 7 counties. And then when every juvenile court judge in Harris County has 2 judges, one's elected, one's appointed. And I was appointed to come back to my roots. And today I sit as the associate judge of the 314th District Court, which is a full circle for me. 34 years later, I'm back where my passion has always been, and that's juvenile court. So now I'm talking to you actually in a new environment, if you will. How do you deal with the issues of children? And let's focus on, and I'll take questions from the range of questions you may have about the juvenile system, but I want to focus on the Children's Protective Services side of it. I think that's the one that draws the most headlines. It's that which draws the most interest by folks, and that's what my court does. My court deals with, quite frankly, with the civil side. And so really what I do for a living is I take children away from their parents. I mean, that's a hard way to earn a living. And that's a heck of a job description. Well, what do you do for a living? I take babies away from their parents. You can see how quickly my dates disappear, especially if they have children. That evening comes to an abrupt halt pretty quickly. And the problem is now it's compounded with something that none of us have ever seen. I don't think anyone was living in 1918. If you were, please raise your hand. I have many questions of you. But this is something we've never seen, and we've got the same children. And that's another thing that was interesting to me when I came back full circle to the juvenile courts. People ask, are the issues going to be different? Are you going to see things that are different than you did when you first started in the mid 80s? And when I got on the bench, I was wondering the same thing myself. How will I adjust to the new families, the new kids? What's the landscape? Well, not anything has changed. And that's an indictment. That's an indictment. That's not a positive thing, that nothing has changed. The families are still the same. The issues that confront these families are still the same. The kids have the same issues. And our response to those seem to be the same. that's the best I can say about that without, and I wouldn't get political about it. I'm just saying my observations, nothing has changed with regard to the same type of kids that I deal with and the same types of families that I deal with. Let me sprinkle some good news in that statement for all of us as a society. My court deals with abused and neglected children. That's what CPS does. They remove children from abused or neglected families. The good news for all of us is that we do not have a great deal of abused children. And when I talk about that, I mean in the literal sense. Broken arms, skull fractures, shaken baby syndromes, that type of issue. We do have it, of course, but it doesn't take any one of you all following this could be a judge in a skull fracture case. It doesn't take much discretion on the part of a judicial officer to make a decision that those parents are not going to get their kid back. It doesn't take much. You can take a layperson and they would come up with the same decision that a judge would come up with regard to an abused child. How many more chances could we possibly take with that particular parent, particularly since there's probably a criminal case that's pending parallel and we don't really know the outcome of that case, and therefore you have to make some more permanent plans for the children. But let's talk about the good that we all can do as a society, and those are for the neglected children, and that's a broad definition of neglect. What do you do with those families who are generationally, and generationally still poor, generationally still undereducated, generationally their own issues have never been resolved, and they have children, and those children therefore become the product of that environment that they're in, and that's the issue that faces, I think, the modern day juvenile court. I'm gonna put the overture of the pandemic in just a moment, which only complicates things immeasurably. If you think they were neglected before, why don't you put a helping of epidemic on top of that, sprinkle that, and see how many services are available for these same families now in this particular state that we find ourselves in. So we have and when I say parents, I have to say that's a parentheses, a parent, parentheses, S, parents, because we're usually dealing with a single parent system. We are usually dealing with a parent who has tremendous history and ongoing issues with drugs. That's probably the number one, and that includes alcohol. You don't exclude alcohol when you talk about drugs. You talk about the alcoholic families. And I don't believe there's anybody, I would bet there's no one listening to this that doesn't have some family member or some family history that doesn't involve an alcoholic issue or a drug issue. I don't know of any family that has escaped those issues. So it's not a function of whether or not that's a problem. We know that's a problem for that individual parent, but when you put that in context of the child, what is it like to be raised in a dark family like that, where the resources are scarce and the ability to care for these children become therefore even scarcer? And there was a time in the mid-'80s when I was a juvenile court back then, that the extended family was actually pretty local. That you had a lot of family support systems that were available. When I can remember the time when a kid would show up, a younger kid, or it doesn't matter, we're getting ready to take the kid away from the parents, and I've never seen so many relatives show up. And so you had an extended family that seemed to be more localized than we have now. We have such a mobile society that it makes it much more difficult to put children with family, which, by the way, is our primary goal. That's our goal. Our goal is to put children with family. as soon as we can. Which, by the way, one of the great things any organization can do is see how they can volunteer in a system like this. You know, where would be the highest and best use for resources to be able to lend a help to these kids. That could include nothing more than food bank, because a lot of these families are dependent upon that particular organization or any other organization. I'm not singling out one, that just comes to mind. They've been highlighted so much during this pandemic. The CPS system, and this is a criticism it's an indictment, if you will, of our prevention mentality in the CPS system. We do very little to prevent the ultimate outcome of removing children. We do very little to identify learning issues for these children as early as pre-K, because obviously we're still having a political discussion. I'm not mixing politics, but we're having a legitimate discussion whether we should have universal pre-K in our state. We're still debating things that those of us who have means wouldn't even have that debate. I mean, we would a debate about whether our kids should be in pre-K. That's not a debate. As a matter of fact, you're going to pre-K. I don't want to go to school. You're going to pre-K. And so we don't have those debates when there's resources. And I think, and the idea here is, how do we get the mentality shifted I remember, I'll give a short anecdotal story about this. It seemed like 1998, 1999, then Superintendent Rod Page asked me to chair what new schools of the next century should look like. We were turning the clock. We were going into the 2000s, and it was time to look at our educational model that, by the way, had not changed for over 100 years. Matter of fact, our educational model hasn't changed. We have the same model that we've used for the last 150 years, the public education model. And my committee was to design the school of the 2000s. And I've always had and Chris Bell, former city council member, congressman, he was heading up the finance committee. So I was heading up the design, and Chris was heading up the finance committee. And we had a meeting at the HISD building, when it was over here on Richmond. And I walked in, and at that time, maybe that's changed now, but then the big thing was oval tables. Oval was in, so you could see everybody. Has that changed, by the way? I'm not sure that's changed, but oval was in. And everyone was sitting around the table. I was a little bit late. That wasn't by design. But when I walked in, there was a lot of angst going on and a lot of chatter going on. And I was the chairman, so I had to rein that in. But I first started by saying, what is the problem? I've never heard such a cacophony of sounds here. And they said, well, we have only 2 weeks to design the schools for the next century. And I said, I couldn't have asked for an easier assignment than that. To which they all turned to me, what are you talking about? I said, well, the solution here is to answer one question and one question only, and then we can leave this meeting. Really? That's how simple this is. So I posed the question. How many of you all believe that St. John's is a great school? And all the hands went up. For those who are not from Houston, that's our finest private school. Kincaid may argue, but I think St. John's is the finest private school in Houston, Harris County, Texas. Everyone raised their hands. So for affect, I slapped my hand on the table and I said, well, okay then, let's duplicate it. And I left. Let's just duplicate it. And I walked out the door for affect. I came back in. I said, folks, if we really are serious about this, this is how easy this is. K through 12, pre-K through 12, same campus, 12-to-1 student-teacher ratios. We'll put them in some uniforms. We'll grow some ivy on the walls, and we'll call it a day. And then we're through. That's it. That's all we have to do. We just have to do as the wealthy do, because they're probably onto something. That's always been my mantra. Do as those that have resources do, because you know what? I bet you they're on to something. They put their kids in pre-K. I think we ought to do that. They get their kids to the pediatricians from birth all the way through. I think that's exactly what we should do. I mean, there's just so many easy things that we should be able to do. And their answer was, and that's the historical answer, we can't afford it. And I said, well, wait a minute. That's Chris Bell's problem. He's the finance committee. We're the design committee. So obviously we didn't get very far. And here's what happened when we turned the clock. Our recommendations, which were very similar, except we couldn't break the campuses K through 12 into one campus. Our suggestions were very small schools, smaller schools, and smaller teacher ratios, all the things that are logical. And what they proceeded to do with all of our recommendations is they built 2 new high schools, West Side and Chavez. Each of them have over 5,000 students. So much for, so much for my recommendations. And the reason I mention this is because in my world, this isn't a political world, in my world, I'm dealing with the kids that don't have the resources that we need. So we're steadily trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So let's talk about the CPS system real quick, and I'm sure that ultimately I will have the sign flashing 5 minutes. The CPS system is the only system that they do their best work in an inverse pyramid. They do their best work at the top, and then it implodes. So it's an inverse pyramid scheme. When I say they do their best work at the top, their removal scheme and system is pretty good. I've been doing this for a long time, and I have very rarely faulted their ability to take the referrals, vet them, remove children only when they have to, or put the children with family under safety plans. I've always felt they've done an excellent job there. It's after that our system breaks down to a fault, because we don't have the services to bolster that. We can't get the success ratios that we want. Most of the time, the parents don't get their kids back, even if it is neglect, because we anticipate these children, these families will in 12 months fix their lives. And I can tell you, quite frankly, that's impossible. It's impossible. So that's why we look for family very quickly. Now, I want to take the pandemic. I've never dealt with this before in my life. And so therefore, I'm going to add a layer to this, which is not a good layer. We now have children, because of the pandemic, that can't even see their parents. And what we're talking about there is the trauma the system itself brings on. You see, we ourselves create trauma for the kids. I mean, they are traumatized. We know we've removed them, and then we continue to have trauma. We add trauma to their lives. I'll give you a quick example. The older the child, and I won't say this from a child psychiatry standpoint, every child suffers trauma, and it's measurable. Perhaps maybe not an infant, but it's measurable. But let's take the older child. Let's take a freshman in high school to be, or an 8th grader, 7th grader, or a junior. And CPS comes in and talks to him and says, well, we're going to have to move you from your home. And the child says, who's not represented at that time, the child says, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure I know exactly what that means. I know literally what that means. You're going to take me out of my home. And that may even whisper, thank you. Maybe. But after that, the reality of that is what? What CPS doesn't tell them is, when they ask the question, or if they ask the question, well, does that mean I have to change my school? My high school? Oh, yeah. My friends? Yeah. Well, I'm on the varsity track team. Well, there'll be one at the next, you'll be okay. I'm sure they have a track team at the next school you're going to go to. So we take that infrastructure of these children, remove them, and I don't have any answers for that, except the law says they are entitled to go to the same schools that we remove them from. But do we do that as a practical matter? No. And why don't we do that? Because it's a cost issue. It's a transportation issue. It's moving children in transit as opposed to moving them to a school district where they are can be registered closer to where they live. And so we heap trauma. Now let's take this pandemic. Usually I get to see my kids a lot. They come to court if they're old enough to be able to talk to me. As a matter of fact, all the grocery stores and the drug stores love me the day after all the major candy holidays, because I come in and buy all the half-price candy so that I can have them for my kids when they visit me in court, or National Adoption Day when I give out teddy bears and candy. I can't even see my kids now. They don't have school, and let's talk about that real quick. Of all the reopenings that should be most important to all of whatever we do, we should try to figure out how to get our schools back open. It doesn't really matter what else we do. If the state feels as if we should open tattoo parlors first, okay. Bowling alleys, okay. But until we can fix the dynamics of getting our kids back to school, which, by the way, is the angst of most people who are at home, when are we going to get our kids back to their normalcy? When can we return the most vulnerable who are going through this pandemic to their normal? And very little has been written about how to do that. Very few. I saw an article this morning in today's Chronicle. They're talking about it. I'm just fearful that if I can't have school to put these kids back into some square, my CPS kids, I'm not sure I can rely upon the ability for online learning for these kids. I don't know what's available for them to be able to keep up in school, which they're already behind in. I don't know how to level the playing field to get them back to their peer group, their normal activities, and to allow, no matter how much we open up society, if the parents can't get to work because they've got kids at home, it doesn't really matter what you open up. You still have the same confrontational issue about how do we put these people back to work? And this all relates back in the circle to my job. What do I do with these kids? Where can I put them? So as listeners, if any of y'all have any, and I know you would do it anyway, but if any of y'all have any family members in distress with kids, take them. Don't just take them. Become fictive foster families, because there's that 5 minutes left for me. Is that what it says, or is that a different one? Did you post that? Who posted that 5 minutes?
That was Jesse.
I'm down to 2 minutes now. Oh, okay. Well, then now I'm going to do the song I've been waiting to do. No, I have to shut it off there because I'm jumping back and forth, but now I'm out of time anyway. So really, you guys are going to break out and come back and ask me questions?
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some great discussions. We're going to open up for anyone who wants to do some video questions. We know you're all muted, so if you want to raise your hand or do like one of the little symbols, reaction symbols, we can unmute you and you can ask your question. Otherwise, we'll kind of just go through the written questions that we have. I do kind of want to get it started with one of my own questions. You've talked about universal pre-K a lot. Do you think the best way to help identify those kids who are in the most need of resources, and the best way to kind of help children?
Well, I've always been a big fan of universal pre-K. Once again, my mantra being do as those that have resources do, and just follow what they do. It is the only way to self-identify. Remember, in most of our families that I'm dealing with, and this is painting with too broad a brush, I'll just say my families, they're undereducated. The parents themselves are woefully undereducated, and their ability to tend to the educational needs and the diagnostic needs. Remember, that's a loaded question, because even from a diagnostic standpoint, have those children had the proper pediatric tracking even through their infancy, the 0 to 3, the critical 0 to 3 period? Have we done all those testings? We know statistically, give or take, that 1 out of every 5 children in our classrooms are dyslexic. Now, it may not affect them at all. It may be some that are affected. It may not be, but that's a huge number. And if that's the case, we know that we don't do enough diagnostics to make any indent for the time they get ready to start school as kindergartens. They're way behind, is what I'm saying. They're way behind physically and educationally. So yes, I'm a big pre-K. That's where you would do all the testing. That's where you would do them. They would be there. So you would do it then. Diagnostic testing would be right there when they're 3 years old, when it needs to be done.
All right, great. Thank you. I see Samia has a question. I'll go ahead and unmute you. You're good to go.
Thank you. Good morning. And thank you, Eric, for really great presentation. So I'm a data geek. And one of the things I understand from your talk is that the socioeconomics and educational levels of the people you primarily see are rather low.
Yes.
Having said that, the white population who also abuse their children are hideously underreported because they can provide services for those children to cover the rich white population, sorry. And I'm wondering if you could address that part of the equation, that there are children that are also.
Well, there has to be statistically. That's correct. You have to break that down. Abused and neglected. The more resources you have, that neglect issue falls by the wayside. That part of it, which is like 80% of my docket, maybe 85% of my docket. And if you've got the resources, their needs can be taken care of, even if they're in a dysfunctional family. After all, we all know that statistically, a bunch of wealthy families have drug issues, and children have drug, but they can afford the rehab. They can afford private schooling. They can do a lot of things that rest of us could not do. Listen, let me tell you something. I don't believe I have anyone listening to me. I know I couldn't. If my kid fell off the cliff, my grandkids fell off the cliff right now, how many $30,000 a month stays could I afford for drug rehab? I mean, how many months can you go? Insurance, and that's another thing. Folks I deal with don't have any insurance. Those that have insurance, even the wealthy, that's a 30-day policy, right? And at the end of 30 days, what do the insurance companies say? Oh, he's fixed, or she's fixed. Thank you very much. It doesn't. We don't have a good infrastructure system. I was like I said, at 29, I was vice chair of the Mental Health Mental Retardation Authority. I fought my whole time that I was there, and I finally got 10% of the money that goes to MHMRI, state and local funds, to go to children. 10% of the budget for children's services. We didn't have one, nor do we now. We did because I forced it. You know that right now we have zero indigent psychiatric beds for children. For children, zero. So you're this parent that we're dealing with. You're this parent, the one that doesn't have the resources. We have parents bringing us the children now. We're inheriting children through our system. That's how bad it is. They bring them like the scruff of the neck. Here, there's yours. I mean, and the statute allows us to do it. Thank goodness, I suppose, but at least I do have resources. They're not great, but I do have resources. I can order things. It's like a kid in my juvenile system. Sometimes parents want their kids to just break the law just a tiny bit, just a little bit. Why? Because at least my system has like boarding school beds, like my own military academy, what the wealthy do, of boarding schools, military. At least I have a semblance of that. And I have psychiatric services, educational services. I can put a squad of educational specialists on this kid. Something we ought to all have, that your kid has to get in trouble. That's a long-winded answer, is that they don't mask it. The wealthy don't mask it. They just have resources to move the kid along. They just move the kid along to be more functional. The poor families don't have that.
Okay. All right, we're gonna, before I see you, Kimberly, before I get to you, we have a Facebook question from Susan. Is funding the same for CPS now as it was back in the 80s?
If you were to look at it from an inflationary standpoint, probably less, because right now so much of the CPS money has gone to lawsuits being settled, the foster care lawsuit, and rightfully so, more pay for the less caseload for CPS workers. But what's missing in that equation is the base element of parents getting the right therapy they need to get to the yes mark, and the kids getting what they need to catch themselves up. We're woefully behind and deficient there. And as I said early on, 34 years later, I don't see much difference. That's an indictment. So no, yeah, they get more money in terms of dollars in the budget if you look at the line item budget, but we still don't do the prevention side of this. We do intervention work. We do so little prevention work that if we could leave these kids in their home but rush the resources into the home, we wouldn't have to worry about it so much. But we don't do it. Plus, this is long-winded. Our school systems aren't equipped either, and yet statutorily they're supposed to take care of a great deal of this, and yet here we are. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, we're woefully deficient. I was talking off the air that we just have to one day decide where we're going to reprioritize some of our spending. For example, I went to legislature not too long ago. It's been a pretty good while now, and I said every X number of years, give me one lane of an expansion of a highway, just one lane, the cost of one lane for children's services, just one lane. The Katy Freeway, for example, cost $100 million a mile to expand. And I just want one lane. Every 5 years, give me a lane for children's services. That's all. That's all. And that I'm not being political. I'm just being, I want my money. I want a say-so of where we reallocate some of our tax dollars. Tax dollars are there. I'm just advocating a reallocation of my priorities. I want my day in the sun. I want my priorities. Psychiatric beds for children, pre-K, all those kinds of things. That's all. Just banging the drum. I've been doing it for 50 years. Bang, bang, bang. And here I am, balder, but no further along.
All right. Kimberly, you had a question, and I've unmuted you.
Let the judge know I'm a former teacher, and I'm dyslexic, and a good portion of my family is dyslexic.
Yeah, but besides that, what's wrong?
I just want to say, when you say universal preschool, what do you mean? Do you mean take the first grade curriculum and shove it down three-year-olds onto 3-year-olds, which is what's been happening? Or are you talking about having a universal system where we have what we used to call play school, where the kids get together and they learn how to get along, they learn how to use their muscles, they learn how to control their emotions?
Yes, I'm talking about the maturational level of where a child should be at age 3. I'm talking about in term and even colors, alphabet colors. I'm not talking about cramming down. I'm just talking about normal growth progression you would expect to see in a 3-year-old, and that would include, all sort of motor skills, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, all those kinds of things. We don't have that. We don't even have that element built into our infrastructure of what we have in our community right now. We don't. What the substitute for that is, and there's no. We do have a lot of daycare, but they're not really specialized in that type of teaching methodology. They're not. After all the private schools have pre-K. I mean, all of them now. It's big money. I mean, it's huge money, but they do have a function. I mean, they actually do teach No, they're not going to come out of pre-K reading at 7th grade level. I mean, no, but they are going to recognize colors. They're going to know their alphabet. They're going to have a speech pattern. If they're having speech issues, they will be able to deal with them there. Things that you wouldn't otherwise notice until they get to kindergarten. And you as a teacher know sometimes kindergarten, 1st grade is way too late for these kids. They fall behind even further. I just want to equalize the playing field, level it. That's all. That's all I want to do. I don't want to run out of time here. Where's my timekeeper here? Because
we've got time for one more question. I'm actually going to do one from the written questions in the chat room. With the increase, with the pandemic, everyone's at home. There's been a lot of articles written. This question comes from Laura, by the way. A lot of articles written about the increase in domestic abuse and violence. So many families confined there. How's the Harris County Juvenile Court responding to that? And are you basically in a holding pattern?
Well, we very poorly. That's the short answer. Because we are shut down. We capture, like I talked earlier. Let's go to the CPS side. The juvenile side, we've just been on a fast track to try to get as many kids out of detention as possible. We have a very hot courthouse right now. We have 2 kids who've got the virus who are in detention. So we have a very hot courthouse. We can't bring anybody in. I do my docket once a week on Zoom. But the CPS cases, that's like a tsunami coming. That wave is going to hit us as soon as we're open for business. Right now, we just remove these children, we put them in foster care, and then we lose sight of them. We lose track of them. The families aren't getting any services to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. This is horrible. I mean, we are awaiting the tsunami to answer the question. It is going to be full bore, multiple increase percentage-wise of kids, multiples. And we'll get more and more because the poverty level is going to drop even further. Parents' ability to do anything is going to drop, and we're going to get more and more kids into our system, sometimes voluntarily, not involuntarily. So tragedy all around, my friends, but something we don't talk enough about, what the pandemic is doing to our kids, literally doing to our kids. Does that wrap us up?
That wraps us up, unfortunately.
Well, anytime. I'd be glad to come back for command performance.
Awesome. It was a fantastic talk. Definitely learned
You tell me. You just tell me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being willing to be here via Zoom. Definitely when we start actually being able to meet again, we'd love to have you in person and get you that coffee that you were promised.
I'll be there. That's right. Next time you see me, I want to do it in person so I can get that coffee I was promised.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So thank you. Thanks. All right. So before we have one final song from Louise, we're going to post the link to donate in the chat window. So if you go down to the bottom, you should see a chat bubble. You can click that and you'll see the chat on the side. We'll also post it to the comments in the Facebook video section. While we're no longer meeting in a physical space, we still are paying the musicians and still have some fixed expenses. And despite this continued pothole in the road, Oasis still has big plans for the future, one of which might be a new website coming very soon for the entire network. We're very excited about that. Yay! Jesse's pumping the roof there. So if you are able, and I do mean if you are able, I know a lot of people are in a tight position right now with the pandemic going on, please consider donating. And with that, we will have one final song from Louise.
There it is. All right, I'm back for one more. I thought that I wrote a song recently that I've probably played through about 5 times, but you know what? I feel like this is as good a time as any to debut some new material, so I'll give you guys one more and send you on your way. Thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed hearing you talk and everything. It's a great community y'all got going on, so thanks for bringing me in for a little bit. All right, let's give this a shot.
just a story written on the walls of our hallways. What have we done? If only the walls could speak, they might run. Settle for me now. They said settle for me now. I want you to feel me. Crush your head between my arms, between my hips, and I'm going home again. What have I done? I told myself not to run away, but head on. Instead I froze, stuck to my seat. I could not feel my toes. What have you done? I have forsaken you, and to think you were the one. Oh, looking back, my bones are shaking too, and I could have run. Instead of trying to make the best of this, I should have run. Let go of your heart, or you will only be disappointed. And dream from the start, and don't let anyone take it from you. Thank you guys so much for having me. If you want to find out more about me, I'm all over the social medias, just Louise, that easy. So thank you guys so much for having me again.
Thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful.
Hey, thank you.
And do we just need to look up Louise on Google's?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, anything like that. Yeah, look, the links just got posted in the chat. That was awesome. Yeah, so LOU_ALOUISE.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks guys.
Thanks. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. Special thank you to Judge Eric Andelll and you, Louise. Tonight, be sure and join us again on Zoom for another Corona Convo update at 8 p.m. tonight. Keep an eye out for our future emails, Facebook posts, meetup, however you keep in touch with us. We'll be posting updates soon. Have a great week and stay safe.